Hi, guys, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Men's Movement. And I'm going to share with you 10 things I've learned whilst training over 1,000 clients. Are you ready for number 8? We've covered all sorts of things, and we're ready up for number 8. I've trained people for over 4 decades. I'm the trainer from down under, and here we go. And I'm going to start with a bit of the politics which is involved in our fitness industry. It's not, I call it the unhealthy health industry. So sadly, a lot of misconceptions that happened over the last 4 decades and beyond, I'd like to share with you. One of the big things that happened in the early 2000s was people were all concerned and still are concerned about how unhealthy it is to be overweight. They say it's unhealthy to be overweight. And I'm going to share something with you about that. I'm going to share the difference between being fit and fat. And I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to quickly just look at my notes here. I'm going to share with you things like, what are you actually training for? Are you training for fitness, or are you training to lose weight? There's a big difference. And clients get that confused all the time. They come in and ask me I want to get fit, train up, lose weight. And I want to clarify, because once you find your goal, there's no stopping you. So all the things I'm going to talk to you about today are going to shortcut and make you get your goals a lot easier. I've trained these clients for a long time, and repetition happens all the time. People come in and they say similar stuff, and we can shortcut and get your goals quicker by learning from their mistakes and sometimes from my mistakes, because we all make mistakes. So it's not what you're eating, it's why you're eating. And I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. And I'm going to mention about Sigmund Freud and being a cigar smoker. But first, let's cross down here and let's look at this, because I want to talk to you about the politics of this. And I've written down here the CDC, and that refers to the CDC back in 2005 or 2004. And they were the fit cops. And they were going around and saying it's not good to be unhealthy. The CDC in America, USA, is the Center for Disease and Control. You would have heard a lot about them. Excuse me. Would have heard a lot about them throughout COVID. In the COVID years, CDC was on the news pretty much every night. It's a Center for Disease and Control. And one of the things they did in America, pushed by politicians, was to pretty much blame fat people and blame people who are overweight and say it was causing a lot of disease in the country of America. Because they don't like, people for some reason seem to not like people who are overweight. And so it swayed against them. So the CDC said over 400,000 deaths are caused by being obese and overweight. Over 400,000 deaths were caused by being overweight. And they completely lied. They completely lied and falsified the evidence in that study. So if you can look it up, 2004, just put in CDC 2004 into the Google magic of Google, and you'll find out that they lied. They overestimated that. They shot it out by about 3.5, nearly 4 times the amount. About 100, just over 100,000 people died due to being overweight. But the CDC and the American politics pushed their they pushed their sort of what do they call it in politics? They pushed their wheelbarrow and wanted to sort of make people who are overweight and fat the villains in this sort of story. So it is not always true, guys. You can be fit and fat. You can be fit and fat, okay? Doesn't mean just because you're overweight, you're not fit. Because fatness is very important. It's very important to be fat because we store energy in our fat. And there's a difference between men and women. Women need a certain amount of weight to gestate and keep the baby and the race going. Guys, on the other hand, don't. So I say to my clients, especially female clients who come in and they're trying to lose weight and they're trying to get rid of fat, I say to them, okay, you're fat, but you're a fat storing machine, and you're a very efficient fat storing machine. Okay, you're a very efficient fat storing machine. A guy, on the other hand, doesn't need to store fat because it doesn't have to progestate and keep the baby inside here. That's not a fat woman, by the way. It's a pregnant lady. You know my drawings? They're quite good, aren't they? So the lady, the female of the race, the guy does his job, and there's a baby there. The baby, if there's a famine for the next 6 months, this young man here will die off. He's got no fat stores. He dies off. We don't need him anymore in the race because we need this person here, this lady here, to keep the baby going. We need it to gestate, progesterone, to progestation. So the fat is stored in the female. They're a very good fat storing machine of the race because if there's no food for the next 6 months, that baby will survive and the race will go on. The human race will go on. And that's why we're here today, because of that very unique gene that keeps the race alive, because the women of the race, the female of the species, is able to store fat. Whereas the guy doesn't have the fat to store and is not able to store it as much. So there's a big difference between guys training for fat loss and girls training for fat loss. And how I try to describe it, if a couple comes in, I say, your goals are here. I say to the female, I say, here's your goals. Here's the guy's goals. And I give them a ball and say, throw the ball through those goals. And they're about a meter away from the goals. I say, there you are. There's your goal. Easy. Throw the ball through. I say to the female, I say, okay, what I'm going to do with your goals is I'm going to move, this is your weight loss goal, I'm going to move the goalpost closer. I'm going to give you a ball which is this big. And what I'll do is, if you wouldn't mind taking this blindfold with you and the ball, go down the corridor, go around the block, put the blindfold on, spin 3 times and have a shot at the goals. That's how hard it is for a female of the species to lose fat. It's really hard for them to lose fat. A guy can lose fat like that. A girl, it's much harder to lose fat. That's why they struggle a lot more in those Biggest Loser shows and shows like that, because it's much harder for them. It doesn't excuse them to eat anything they want if they're trying to change their shape, but a guy will find it much easier. That's just a bit of knowledge there about the difference between the biology of a female and a male. There is a difference in the biology, and there's a difference in the fat and the fitness, which we just talked about just before. But I want to talk about something else. What are you training for? Because I have ladies coming to me and guys coming to me and they say, I want to get fit, tone up, lose weight. What does that mean? Get fit, tone up, lose weight. I have no idea what that term means. So I got to know what you're training for, because once you find out what you're training for, then you'll find your goals. There's no stopping you once you identify exactly what you're training for. I was training this lady once. I said, what? And she said, I want to get fit, tone up, lose weight. I said, what do you mean? And she stopped and she said, I want to wear really good clothes again and look great when I go out at night. I said, good, well, let's train for that. I said, because do you care if you're running up and down the stairs and you'll be able to run up and down the stairs and not be out of breath? She goes, no, I don't. I said, good, let's train for that change of shape. Because the difference between changing for a change of shape and training for fitness, get fit, tone up, lose weight, it's not the same. So once you identify your goal, you'll definitely get your result, because we can't just run around thinking, oh, I'll lose weight, I'll tone up. They're all made up terms, guys. Highlight your goal and you'll get your goal. So number 8 today is about the distinction between fat and fit and getting toned up, losing weight. There's a big difference. When you go and you think about your goal, what exactly do you want to do? Do you want to play guitar? Great. You want to play guitar? Great. You've decided to play guitar. What sort of guitar? Classical, jazz, blues? What sort of guitar are you going to use? What sort of instruments are you going to use? Are you going to be in a band? Do you want to play in your bedroom? Are you going to perform as a solo artist? There's a huge range There's a huge range there. Aim it, own it, aim it, and you'll get it. You'll get your goal once you highlight your goal. And so the last thing I'm going to do today on this number 8 of the 10 things I've learned while I was training thousands of clients, I want to mention about the psychology. I said we're going to mind your own business, not mind your own business. We're going to mind. We're going to mind. We're going to find out why you're going to do this. Why are you doing this? Why is it that you're doing it? Because once you find out what you're doing it for, it's really easy. And we don't just eat food, we consume food. And we don't just consume food, we consume a memory of the food. And this is really powerful. A lot of people eat a memory. They're eating because it reminds them of something. And I'll just repeat that, because sometimes it's not about the food, it's what's in the mind. It's not the taste which is in the mouth, it's what's on the mind. I think Dr. George Blair West said it best when he said, it's not what's on the tongue, it's what's on the mind when you're eating food. And once you find out the difference, then you can get your goal. So I'll give you a classic story of this. I had a gentleman come in recently and he's trying to lose weight. He wants to change his shape, but he keeps eating certain food. And I've asked him, why does he eat this certain food? Why does he eat the certain food? And we nailed it down. He was eating ice cream after dinner because it reminded him of being a uni student and having dinner, having his ice cream after dinner because his mum gave him the ice cream after dinner because when he was studying to be in his VCE exams, his mother would bring ice creams to him after dinner and it reminded him of the dinner. So there's a bit of a love connection, emotional eating, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we've got to acknowledge that and work through that. Because if you don't work through that and you have some trainer going, cut out your ice cream, the trainer's eventually saying, stop remembering your mother. So we've got to acknowledge that. However, on the flip side of that, because it could be that, but it might not be. So Sigmund Freud was once talking at a seminar, and he was talking, and at the end of the seminar, someone asked him a question time, and said, Mr. Freud, Dr. Freud, I saw you before the evening speech today, and you had a cigar in your mouth. And a cigar in your mouth, you've just said anything in your mouth is an oral fixation, which is like having a sexual connection between putting something in your mouth and a sexual connection. Can you please explain? And the audience all hushed, and everyone thought, oh my God, the young person in the crowd's really sort of stumped Dr. Freud. And Dr. Freud got out a new cigar out of his jacket pocket, clipped off the end, got the lighter, lit up the cigar, and said, sir, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Not every issue, not every time you eat food has to be a memory. Not every connection has to be something you've eaten in the past. Sometimes it's pretty obvious, the chocolates, the lollies, the cups of tea with a biscuit, it's because of habit. People will have celebrations. I've got a lady once who has a celebration with a can of drink, and she cannot drink a can of drink. It has to be that sound reminds her of a party, about being free again, because these connections are so solid, but sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. They're not connected. So today I wanted to sort of give you a crossweave of all the things that have happened over the last 4 decades. And today I wanted to highlight specifically that if you're are you training for fitness or are you training to lose weight? Because sadly, in this world that I live in, I call it the unhealthy health industry. It's the unhealthy health industry. It's not a lot of fun sometimes, and we condemn a lot of people. And there's a really interesting saying about fat politics, because back then in 2004, that I highlighted back here with the CDC, they were condemning a lot of people who are fat, right? You need fat to store to progesterone and to gestate. We need fat. And they were trying to criminalize and virtually, villainiate, I don't know the word, make villains out of people who were overweight and fat. So if you want to lose weight, by all means, that's your gig, but no one should be out there telling you otherwise. And if you are trying to lose weight, it's hard to lose weight if you don't acknowledge what's in the mind. We've got to mine the mind. It's really important to acknowledge what's in the mind. And once you do that, you get a faster, effective way to lose weight. This is all about getting you faster, effective way to lose weight. I've trained people for over 4 decades. I'm trying to get you the best, fastest way to lose weight. And I want to do it all in a sensible way. But sometimes, guys, a cigar is just a cigar. Just like this has been a video, there's just a video. Thanks so much for joining us, guys, and we look forward to seeing less of you next time for number 9 of 10 things I've learned whilst training over thousands of clients. Cheers. Take care.
You've been listening to The Men's Movement. Look forward to seeing less of you next time.